Even as a kid, I felt something was off. Watching pastors act more like politicians, feeling judged for thinking too much and instead of shouting, Amen. The same guilt tripping came centuries earlier in Kemet's fifth dynasty, the moment belief became business. You seeing the parallels? This isn't just about history, it's about how we're manipulated today. Put your thinkers on. What if truth didn't start as belief, but just something you could see? That's exactly how it was in Kemet before the fifth dynasty. Take Ray, for instance. Ra wasn't born out of stories or myths in the beginning. He was the sun, the literal sun outside, just that simple. You didn't need anyone to convince you he existed. Ra rose in the morning, brought the light, and when he set, the world rested. That rhythm wasn't just spiritual, it was survival itself. The sun told you when to plant, harvest, work, and rest. Everything stayed in natural balance because the truth was visible, predictable, aligned with nature. But when pharaohs wanted more power, when elites wanted more control, things started to change. See, truth like that is universal. Anyone can see it and live by it. It doesn't require leadership or a system. So, how do you shift people from living with principle to being ruled by belief? You redefine the truth. That's where theology came in. The natural order of the sun rising became a cosmic drama. Ra isn't just the sun, he's the captain of the boat. Every night he crosses the underworld, battling a serpent to make sure light returns. But here's the mind fuck. What happens if that battle isn't fought? What happens if the sun doesn't rise? Now you got fear, you've got doubt. And so they introduced a solution. The priests. Priests became the mediators, overseeing the rituals to guarantee Ra won his nightly battle. No more observing nature. Now you had to trust them. This shift wasn't just about religion, it was strategic. Userkaf was the first pharaoh of the fifth dynasty. Didn't just create abstract stories about Ra. He built temples for him, and huge ones. His sun temple wasn't just a place for worship, it was a power play named Ray, or stronghold of Ra. It became a symbol of centralized authority. Why? Because if Ra is the ultimate source of life, and the temple is where you honor Ra, then the priest and the pharaoh control how everyone connects to it. Suddenly, Ra isn't just a sun anymore. He's a structure, an institution. Through these temples, pharaohs like Userkaf tied their rule directly to the divine. The message was clear. You don't just serve the king because he has earthly power. You serve him because he's connected to Ra. To make sure you believed it, the temples performed daily rituals, festivals, and sacrifices, reinforcing that divine connection. It wasn't optional. If the workers and farmers wanted the Nile to keep flowing, if they wanted their crops to grow, they needed the priest to do their job. Just like that, natural rhythm got replaced with dependency. Think about it. People went from looking up at the sky and feeling part of the cosmos and looking at obelisks, temples, and rituals, all filtered through elite class. Now, what does that remind you of? Systems today use controlled narratives, whether through media, governments, or religious institutions, to keep people dependent, shaping every part of how we live. How different is it, really? But this was just the start. If the natural flow of the sun could be turned into a system of control, what happens when balance itself, truth itself, gets sold to the highest bidder? Ma'at wasn't just a goddess. She wasn't someone you worship or pray to. At least, not at first. Ma'at was a law, the first law. She represented truth, harmony, and balance in all things. Natural law, cosmic law, moral law, the kind of balance you could see and feel. It was a way of living that denied floods. That was Ma'at in action, feeding the land in perfect rhythm. Crops would grow, the people could eat, and the nation would thrive. But when one person hoarded too much grain or taxes stripped farmers dry, chaos or isfet took over. Famine struck. People revolted. You didn't need a temple or a priest to explain that. That was just how life worked. Cause and effect. That was Ma'at. But see, something shifted. Over time, Ma'at went from being a law you practice, a principle you embody, to something external. Instead of embodying truth, people started bowing to her image. The first sign of this shift was when Ma'at became depicted as a winged goddess holding an ostrich feather. That feather symbolized divine truth. But once you give a principle a face, a form, it's easy to start treating it like an idol. You stop asking, am I living with balance, and start wondering if you're making the right outward gestures. And that's when the game changed. The pharaoh saw the power in this. If Ma'at wasn't just a principle, but a divine figure, then who's better to claim her authority than the king himself? Pharaoh started calling themselves the lords of Ma'at. They made it, their job to maintain order in society. At least that's what they say. In reality, it was about control. Rulers used Ma'at as a tool to legitimize their decisions. Collected taxes, labor, passed laws, all in the name of keeping balance. And the priesthood backed them up, making sure the people believed the king was divinely aligned with Ma'at at all times. Then there were the 42 negative confessions found in texts like the Papyrus of Ani. These were essentially moral checklists tied to Ma'at, statements you had to recite after death to prove your heart was pure. Things like, I have not stolen, I have not lied, I have not caused pain. This sound familiar? The Bible and another video. They were personal accountability at first, a way for individuals to live in harmony with cosmic laws. But under centralized control, they became a judicial. Priests not only defined those sins, but also a judge who upheld Ma'at. It went from how do I stay in balance to how do I stay in their good graces. And the thing is, it's not unique to ancient Egypt. Think about how modern systems work. Laws, religion, even social norms, they all set up gatekeepers. Instead of living by principles, we're told what's right by an external authority. Personal accountability turns into dependence. A simple law turns into institution. So the question becomes, if balance can be sold, what happens when dependence fuels entire economies? The Great Pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and don't sleep on Khufu's dad, Neferu. Anyways, so this stand as some of history's most symbols of human achievement, but they weren't just movements to the heavens. No, these structures were economic engines built on the backs of tens of thousands of workers over decades. The Great Pyramid of Giza alone took about 20 years to complete, with resources pouring in from all across the nation. Limestone, granite, food supplies, laborers. Think about the sheer scale. These weren't just construction projects. They were massive undertakings that consume like practically all available resources. And when so much of a nation's economy is tied to one vision, one man's legacy, you got a system with cracks that only hold for so long. For the workers, these systems created a strange kind of dependency. They weren't slaves, but they weren't free either. These laborers, often farmers during the flood season when agriculture work passed, came to rely on state-organized building projects for food, housing, and purpose. While they were provided these necessities, it wasn't charity, it was control. The elites orchestrating these mega projects concentrated in, obscene amount of wealth and oversight, turning their dominance into a way of life. With every brick laid, their power increased, and a society that supported them edged closer to imbalance. Resources stretched thinner with each rising pyramid, and the workers, ordinary people, bore the weight. And here's the thing about systems built on imbalance. They can't last forever. By the end of the fourth dynasty, the strain reached its breaking point. The wealth funneled into pyramid construction depleted the kingdom's reserves. Egypt's agricultural base, its lifeline, the economy was stretched thin, feeding the workers instead of building stockpiles. And when famine or disruption struck, there was little left to turn to. That tension didn't just vanish, it simmered among the people. At some point, even the gods lost their shine. If you can't eat, things get hectic. Even under grand shadow of pyramid, it doesn't stay invisible for long. You get what I'm trying to say? All right, y'all, so I don't want to rock y'all to sleep, man, so let me just do a quick recap. So, Fifth Dynasty was the turning point when ideology went from principles to theology. With theology, you always give an origin story. Who gave the origin story? The priesthood. So if the priesthood gave the origin story, who became the puppet masters of the fifth and sixth dynasty? It would have been the priesthood. And we see that in modern times, right? Collection plates, all of that with the churches. Exactly. So, and if y'all curious on what time frame this was, this would have been Old Kingdom. So when you look at the pharaonic era, you always have early dynastic, then it segues right into Old Kingdom. Old Kingdom would have been from 2686 BCE to 2181 BCE. And it has Dynasty 3, 4, 5, and 6 within that. Third dynasty, you had Imhotep. He made the first known pyramid, the step pyramid. Imhotep was what they would consider the first recorded polymath. That means a genius in multiple subject matters. He was a physician, a priest. He was a priest as well. And then also, he was an architect. Third dynasty would have been from 2686 BCE to 2613 BCE. And then you would have had a fourth dynasty, right? Fourth dynasty would have been from 2613 BCE to 2494 BCE. Fourth dynasty, this is what they call like the great, pyramid era. This was kickstarted with Khufu's father, Seneferu. He built 3 pyramids in that time. And it was actually Seneferu that made the first perfect angular smooth-sided pyramid, the triangular pyramid, right? So that's the fourth dynasty. And then once again, the last pharaoh of the fourth dynasty, he said no more with all of this pyramid shit, essentially, because it took up too many resources. What did I say? Kemet is based in economics. Look at the geography. So that's why we segue into the fifth dynasty. Fifth dynasty would have been from 2494 BC to, I'm sorry y'all, fucking mosquitoes. It would have been from 2494 BCE to 2345 BCE. Yes. And then you would have segued into the sixth dynasty. And this would be another topic for another day. This is when you will see nomarchs will have more power than the pharaohs because they had their own private armies and they had a lot of territory and land. But anyway, sixth dynasty would have been from 2345 BCE to 2181 BCE. So I just want to give y'all that quick sum up. Principles is simply what you can see in nature, right? You have day, you have night. Plants give you oxygen, you give them carbon dioxide when you exhale. It's things that you can see in nature. Those was principles. Those was things that you can see in reality. And in theology, it's what it is. It's stories, and it's giving it origin stories. Oh, another recap. By the end of the Fifth Dynasty, this is when we get theology textualized. It was textualized through Unas, and you can look up the pyramids of Unas. So, like I said, just want to give y'all a quick recap. All of this word salad that I gave y'all early, man, that's just so y'all can probably get the little fine nuances or whatnot, but this is a quick recap just so we can just remember. Y'all know what it is. Don't be stuck and done forever. Let's learn and grow together. It's Heff.